How could they possibly understand? Mully pressed the sticky rice mixture firmly into the banana leaf cone, her knuckles white. Outside her small, quiet house in Nonthaburi, the midday sun beat down relentless, but inside a familiar chill of anxiety prickled her skin. Bangkok, Anand, his wife Dara, and that place. She couldn't bring herself to call it a proper shop. A bookstore/cafe, Anand had explained proudly on the phone, tucked away in some trendy alley near Uri. Trendy didn't pay the bills. Trendy didn't offer security, a pension, the solid ground her generation had clung to so desperately. She arranged the Khao Neo Mamuang meticulously in the tiered tiffin carrier, the sweet scent of coconut milk and ripe mango filling the air. A peace offering, perhaps, or maybe just ballast against the worries churning within her. Anand had sounded tired on their last call, thin even. Was Dara feeding him properly? This modern life, this chasing of passion, it drained the youth right out of them. She sighed, wiping a bead of sweat from her temple. Her own husband, Somchai, dozed peacefully in his armchair, the newspaper slack in his lap. He never worried, or perhaps he just never spoke of it. Easier sometimes. The phone buzzed beside the neatly stacked plates. Anand. May, we're ready whenever you are. Traffic isn't too bad today. Good, good, Mully said, her voice brighter than she felt. Are you sure you should close the shop just for me? Won't you lose customers? A fractional pause on the line. It's fine, May. It's quiet mid-afternoon anyway. We're looking forward to seeing you. All right, look chai. I'm leaving now. I made some mango sticky rice. Ah, thank you, May. See you soon. The click of the phone ending felt abrupt, leaving a silence that magnified her unease. She picked up the heavy tiffin carrier. Security, stability, that's what mattered. Love was important, yes, fundamental, but love couldn't stop the landlord knocking, or the bills piling up like monsoon clouds. She just wanted them to be safe. Why couldn't they see that her questions, her suggestions, came from that deep well of fear for them? She locked the door behind her, the familiar weight of the tiffin carrier, a counterpoint to the lightness of dread settling in her stomach as she hailed a taxi towards the sprawling, indifferent heart of Bangkok. The taxi crawled through the congested veins of the city, finally depositing Mully outside Incan Echoes. The sign was hand-painted, charming in a way that made her teeth ache slightly. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and aging paper, a pleasant combination she couldn't deny. Books lined shelves that reached towards the high ceiling, interspersed with small tables where a couple of young people tapped away on laptops. Anand waved from behind a counter laden with pastries and a gleaming espresso machine. Dara emerged from between two towering stacks of novels, offering a polite way, her smile warm but perhaps a little tight around the eyes. May, welcome. Anand came around the counter, taking the tiffin carrier. Wow, this looks amazing. Dara, look. Dara peered appreciatively. Kop kun ka mai Mully. It smells wonderful. It's nothing, Mully demurred, her eyes scanning the space. Cozy, yes, clean, but quiet. Too quiet for a business meant to thrive. She perched on a stool Anand offered, feeling overdressed in her formal silk blouse amidst the casual chic of the place. They made small talk, the traffic, the weather, Somchai's health. Anand prepared her a coffee, manoeuvring the machine with practiced ease. They decided on a simple noodle shop nearby for a quick late lunch. Sitting on plastic stools under a whirring fan, the aroma of broth and fried garlic momentarily soothing, Mully felt the familiar urge bubble up. She waited until they were halfway through their bowls of kwai teo roa. So, she began, stirring her noodles with perhaps more intensity than necessary. Are sales picking up? You need a proper plan, Anand. Just hoping people walk in isn't enough in Bangkok. Anand's chopsticks paused mid-air. He swallowed. We're doing okay, May. We had that author event last week. It brought in quite a few new faces. We're building a community. Community doesn't pay the rent, Mully countered, keeping her voice level. And you both look tired. Especially you, Anand. She turned towards Dara. Dara, look, you must remind him to rest. He looks thin. Are you making sure he eats properly? Dara's hand, which had been reaching for the chili flakes, froze. She lowered it slowly, her gaze dropping to her bowl. Anand works hard. Mully, we both do. We eat well. The reply was soft, barely audible above the street noise, but the discomfort radiated off her like heat from the pavement. Anand quickly jumped in. We're fine, May, really, just busy. He forced a smile. It's good busy. Mali wasn't convinced. Your cousin Lek just got promoted again, she pressed on, unable to stop herself. Assistant manager at the bank now. Such a secure path. Good benefits, a clear future. She saw the flicker in Anand's eyes. Defensiveness, hurt, quickly masked. Dara was meticulously rearranging the condiments on the table, her knuckles white. The rest of the meal passed in strained silence, punctuated only by the clatter of dishes and the roar of passing motorcycles. As Mali prepared to leave the bookstore later, accepting their polite goodbyes, the unsold mango sticky rice felt heavier than before. The air conditioning hummed, but the space felt cold, the echoes in Ink and Echoes suddenly sounding hollow. Current part characters, 34 for 41, total characters, 679. Back in the quiet sanctuary of her Nonthaburi home, Malay replayed the visit. The stiff set of Dara's shoulders, the way Anand's smile hadn't quite reached his eyes after her comments about Lek. She felt a pang of something. Not guilt, exactly, more like frustration. Why did they react that way? She was only trying to help, to guide them based on her own hard-won experience. Somchai listened patiently as she recounted the afternoon, nodding occasionally. "They are young, Mali," he murmured finally, turning a page of his book. "They need to find their own way." Easy for him to say. He didn't carry the weight of worry like she did. She rinsed the empty tiffin carrier, scrubbing harder than necessary. It was a parent's duty to worry, wasn't it? To point out the pitfalls? A few days later, scrolling idly through Facebook while waiting for her Gankeo 1 to simmer, a short video popped up on her feed. It was one of those animated explainers, popular with the younger generation. This one, subtitled in Thai, discussed words that hurt, how well-intentioned advice can damage family bonds. It depicted cartoon parents asking questions startlingly similar to her own, about finances, about career choices, about grandchildren. It showed the cartoon children reacting with hidden sadness and frustration, feeling judged rather than supported. Malay's finger hovered over the screen. She felt a strange, uncomfortable flicker of recognition. She quickly scrolled past, dismissing it. Silly cartoons, Western ideas. Still, the images lingered at the edge of her thoughts. The next time she spoke to Anand on the phone, she hesitated before asking about the shop. The usual, "Is it busy?" felt lodged in her throat. Remembering the cartoon, she took a breath and tried something different. "How was that author event you hosted last week? Did it go well?" There was a surprised pause, then Anand's voice came back, warmer, more detailed than usual. "It was great, May. We were packed. The author sold quite a few books and we got some good publicity online. Dara took some really nice photos." He actually sounded enthusiastic, sharing details about the positive feedback they received. Mully listened, a small, unfamiliar warmth spreading through her. It felt nice, easier. But old habits clung like humidity. Weeks later, Anand mentioned offhand that a trendy new chain bookstore was opening just a few streets away from Ink and Echoes. Mully's anxiety flared instantly. "See?" She blurted out, the carefully practiced neutrality vanishing. "Too much competition. I told you that area was becoming saturated. Maybe it's time to seriously reconsider a proper job, Anand. Just part-time, even?" The warmth evaporated from his voice. "May, we knew there was competition. We have our own niche. Please." The line went quiet, the unspoken hurt hanging heavy between them. Malay felt a familiar wave of frustration, quickly followed by that uncomfortable flicker she'd felt watching the video. Had she done it again? She started watching them more closely during their brief visits or video calls. Anand rubbing his temples when discussing rent. Dara's quick, almost imperceptible flinch when Malay mentioned saving money. These weren't signs of laziness or incompetence, she slowly began to realize. They were signs of stress, the same stress she felt, just expressed differently. Anand and Dara seemed to notice the subtle shifts too. When Mali managed to ask an open-ended question or simply listen without interrupting with advice, they exchanged glances, wary at first, then softening into something like cautious hope. Dara once tentatively mentioned to Anand, loud enough for Mali to overhear on a call, "Maybe your May is trying to understand." Anand, he'd simply grunted non-committally, but the seed was planted. Then the espresso machine sputtered its last gasp. Anand mentioned it casually during a call, sighing about the unexpected expense of repair or replacement. "It's crucial, May. Can't run a cafe without coffee." Marlee's protective instincts surged, instantly overriding her recent fragile attempts at mindful communication. "Oh, look, Chai! That's terrible!" Her mind raced. This was proof. Proof that their venture was precarious, that they needed her practical help. "Listen," she said, her voice firm with conviction. "I can lend you the money, but you have to promise me you'll both start looking for some part-time work, something stable, just as a backup. You can't rely solely on this place." The offer hung in the air, heavy with conditions. There was a long silence. Then Anand's voice, quiet but steady. "Thank you for the offer, May. That's very generous. But we'll manage. We have some savings set aside for emergencies like this, and Dara found a place that does repairs reasonably." He didn't sound angry, just distant, resolute. He was politely refusing her help, refusing her conditions. Marlee felt a sting of rejection, quickly followed by a surge of anxiety. Why wouldn't he let her help? Why was he so determined to make things difficult? Didn't he understand she just wanted to ease their burden? A few days later, feeling unsettled, Marlee found herself searching online. Not for videos this time, but for articles about family communication, specifically between Thai generations. She stumbled upon a forum where people shared experiences. One post resonated deeply. A young man wrote about his parents constantly comparing him to successful cousins, making him feel inadequate despite working hard in a field he loved. He mentioned the concept of kreng jai, that ingrained Thai politeness, the reluctance to cause discomfort or confrontation, making it hard to express his true feelings to his elders. He wished they would ask about his happiness, not just his salary. He wished they understood that success looked different now. Marlee read the post twice, her heart constricting. Krengjai. Was that why Anand and Dara rarely pushed back directly? Were their polite deflections, their strained smiles, just masks for deeper hurt? She thought about Anand's quiet refusal of her loan offer. It wasn't stubbornness, perhaps. It was him drawing a boundary, protecting his autonomy in the only way he felt he could without causing a major confrontation. The next time Anand called, just for a quick chat, Marlee felt a knot of apprehension. What should she say? How could she bridge this gap that seemed to widen with every well-intentioned word she uttered? He was talking about a local artist they were featuring in the bookstore. Instead of asking if the art was selling, Marlee took a deep breath and asked, "What kind of art is it, Anand? Tell me about the artist." He seemed surprised, then launched into an explanation, his voice regaining some of its earlier warmth. He talked about the artist's technique, the themes she explored. Marlee focused on listening, truly listening, picturing the artwork he described. She didn't offer advice. She didn't compare it to anything else. She just listened. When the call ended, the silence didn't feel empty or tense. It felt peaceful. A small step, perhaps, but it felt like stepping onto slightly firmer ground. The approach of Marlee's birthday brought with it a suggestion from Anand. They could host a small dinner for her at Ink and Echoes. "Just family, May. We can close up a bit early. It would be nice." Marlee hesitated. Celebrating her birthday in that place? It felt unconventional, but Anand sounded genuinely hopeful. Perhaps this was their way of extending an olive branch, of sharing their world with her on their terms. "All right, Luke Chai," she agreed, trying to inject warmth into her voice. "That sounds lovely. Lovely and terrifying." The pressure to navigate the evening without causing friction felt immense. The evening arrived, humid and thick with the scent of impending rain. Marlee, Somchai beside her, looking vaguely lost amidst the bookshelves, sat at a larger table Anand and Dara had set up in a corner. Dara had arranged simple flowers in old ink bottles. Anand was bustling between the counter where he'd laid out food ordered from a nearby restaurant and the table. It was awkward, but there was an undercurrent of effort from everyone. They ate, talked about neutral topics. Somchai asked Anand about a football match. Dara showed Marlee photos on her phone of a recent weekend trip to Ayutthaya. Marlee complimented the food, genuinely enjoying the familiar flavors. For a while, it seemed possible they might navigate the evening unscathed. Then Lek's name came up, inevitably. Marlee's sister called to wish her happy birthday, and during the call, gushed about Lek's latest success. A bonus, a potential overseas posting. After hanging up, Marlee relayed the news, a habitual pride in her nephew colouring her tone. Anand smiled tightly. "That's great for Lek, May." Someone, perhaps an aunt who had joined them, asked Annan and Dara about their own future plans. Any thoughts about expanding the shop? Or maybe starting a family soon? Dara flushed slightly. Annan cleared his throat. We're focused on making the bookstore sustainable right now, he said smoothly. One step at a time. He mentioned a positive review they'd received on a popular Bangkok lifestyle blog. It brought in a few new people, which is good, he added, but honestly, we still need more regular customers to feel truly stable. That was the trigger. The mention of instability, coupled with Lek's success and the deflected question about grandchildren, sent Mali's carefully constructed dam of restraint crumbling. Her anxiety surged, hot and sharp. Regular customers won't come if it looks so niche. The words tumbled out, louder than she intended. I told you this business was risky, Annan. Look at you both, working day and night for what? For uncertainty. Her gaze swept over them, taking in their hopeful, tired faces. Other people your age, people like Lek, they are buying condos, they are thinking about family, about the future. You need to be realistic. This passion won't pay for school fees or emergencies. The comparison, the financial judgment, the dismissal of their hard work, the pressure about grandchildren, it all spilled out in a torrent of anxious love that sounded purely like criticism. The small cafe fell utterly silent. The hum of the refrigerator seemed deafening. Somchai shifted uncomfortably. Dara stared down at her hands, her knuckles white where she gripped the edge of the table. Annan looked directly at his mother, his expression not angry, but filled with a profound, quiet hurt that lanced Mali sharper than any shouting could have. He took a slow breath. Megan, his voice low but clear, steady despite the tremor she saw in his hands. We know you worry. We know you love us. He paused, gathering himself. But when you say things like that, comparing us, dismissing our hard work, telling us our choices are unrealistic, especially here tonight, it feels like a judgment, May, not support. He met her gaze directly. It hurts. It hurts because we value your opinion so much, but it feels like you don't respect our choices, our life. It feels like you don't believe we can actually make this work. Dara reached out and placed a hand gently on Annan's arm, a silent signal of solidarity. Stunned silence descended again. Mali stared at her son, truly seeing the pain etched around his eyes, the weary resignation in Dara's posture. The words from the online forum echoed in her mind. Makes me feel inadequate. Wish they would ask about my happiness, not just my salary. The disconnect yawned before her, the vast gulf between her desperate, fearful love and the crushing weight of its expression. For the first time, perhaps, she saw it not from her perspective of worry, but through their eyes, as constant, wearying disapproval. The air crackled with unspoken words. Mali opened her mouth, then closed it again. Excuses, justifications, explanations of her good intentions, they all felt hollow, useless in the face of the raw hurt in Annan's voice. The image of the cartoon parents, the words from the online forum, Annan's quiet, "It hurts," it all coalesced into a single, sharp point of understanding. She had been so focused on her own fears, her own definition of success, that she hadn't truly seen them. She looked from Annan's steady, wounded gaze to Dara's downcast face, then at her own trembling hands clasped tightly in her lap. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Finally she found her voice, small and rough. She started, then stopped. She took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry, Luck." The words felt inadequate, pebbles tossed into an ocean of misunderstanding, but they were the only ones she had. I didn't realize. Another pause, the admission costing her dearly. "I'm sorry I hurt you, both of you." There were no justifications, no buts, just the apology, bare and unadorned. Annan didn't reply immediately. He held her gaze for a long moment, then gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. The tension in his shoulders seemed to lessen slightly. Dara looked up, her expression unreadable, but no longer actively pained. Somchai cleared his throat quietly. The moment passed, the crisis receding, leaving behind a fragile quiet. The rest of the birthday dinner was subdued, the conversation carefully neutral, but the suffocating tension had eased, replaced by a tentative, uncertain space. Weeks turned into a couple of months. Things weren't magically fixed. Mali still felt pangs of anxiety when she thought about Ink and Echo's finances. The ingrained habit of offering unsolicited advice, of framing concern as criticism, still lurked just beneath the surface, but something had shifted within her. Annan's words, "It feels like you don't believe in us," echoed frequently. She started catching herself before speaking, questioning the impulse behind her words. Was this genuine support, or was it her fear talking? Was she offering help, or demanding control? One Saturday afternoon, she visited the bookstore unannounced, bringing a simple container of homemade kanam chan, layers of steamed coconut and pandan jelly she knew Dara genuinely liked. The shop was moderately busy, a quiet hum of activity. Anand was advising a customer. Dara was arranging a new display near the window, featuring books by local Thai authors. Mali watched Dara work. Her first instinct was to suggest a different arrangement, perhaps something more eye-catching near the entrance. The words formed silently on her tongue. She paused. She took a breath. Instead, she walked over to the display. "This looks interesting, Dara," she said, picking up one of the books. "What is this author like?" Dara looked up, surprised. A genuine smile touched her lips. "Oh, she writes beautifully, May Mali. Very atmospheric. About life in the old parts of Bangkok. This one is her latest." She started telling Mali about the story, her earlier reserve melting away as she spoke about something she was clearly passionate about. Anand finished with his customer and joined them, leaning against the bookshelf, listening. Mali didn't interrupt. She asked a question about another author Dara recommended. When she left an hour later, the atmosphere was light, easy. As she stepped out into the bustling Bangkok street, Mali felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, more satisfying than any "I told you so" could ever be. Later that week, Anand called. He spoke about a new idea they had for the bookstore, hosting small workshops, maybe creative writing or bookbinding. He sounded excited, hopeful, but also realistic about the challenges. Mali listened, picturing the space filled with engaged people. The familiar worry about distractions from the core business flickered. She almost said, "Are you sure you have time for that? Shouldn't you focus on sales?" She stopped herself. She remembered Anand's face on her birthday, Dara's quiet solidarity. She thought about the peaceful feeling after her last visit. "That sounds like a creative idea, Luck," she said instead. Her voice was calm, steady. "What kind of workshops are you thinking about first?" She heard the slight pause on the line, then Anand's intake of breath, almost like relief. He launched into details, his voice animated. Mali leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes, just listening. The path ahead for Ink and Echoes was still uncertain, strewn with the challenges of running a small business in a big city. But her own path, the one towards understanding and connection with her son and his wife, felt clearer, warmer. It required constant vigilance, a willingness to silence her own anxieties in favor of listening, a conscious choice again and again to let her love be felt as support, not judgment. It wasn't easy. But as she listened to the hopeful energy in her son's voice, she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that it was worth the effort. The silence, when it came now, felt less like distance and more like space for them all to breathe. The change wasn't a sudden metamorphosis, but a slow, deliberate turning, like a flower seeking the sun. There were still moments Mali slipped. Hearing about a rent increase for the shop sent a familiar jolt of panic through her, and she had to physically bite her lip to stop herself from suggesting, yet again, that Anand find a real job. Instead, she asked, "That must be stressful. How are you planning to handle it?" It opened the door for Anand to talk through their strategy, negotiating with the landlord, planning a special sales event, without feeling attacked. He sounded worried, yes, but also determined, capable. Seeing that capability, acknowledging it, slowly began to chip away at Mali's own deep-seated need to control the situation. She started noticing other things too. The way Dara's eyes lit up when discussing a new graphic novel series they were stocking. The quiet pride in Anand's voice when he mentioned a regular customer who came in just to chat about books. These weren't metrics of financial success that Mali traditionally valued, but she began to recognize them as markers of a different kind of wealth. Fulfillment, community connection, shared passion. It was a language she was slowly learning to understand, let alone speak. One afternoon, while visiting, she saw Anand looking tired, rubbing his eyes as he worked on the accounts. The old script leaped to her mind. "You work too hard. You need more rest. Is Dara?" She silenced it. She quietly went to the small kitchen area at the back of the shop and made him a cup of hot tea, placing it beside him without comment. He looked up, surprised, then gave her a small, grateful smile that felt more genuine than any forced politeness had before. It was a tiny gesture, but it felt significant, a replacement of anxious words with quiet care. Somchai noticed the change too, in his own quiet way. "You seem calmer about the children, Mali," he observed one evening, peering over his glasses. Mali considered this. "I still worry, Somchai," she admitted, "but I am trying to trust them more, trying to listen. Trying," she added silently, to let her love build bridges, not walls. The relationship wasn't perfect. There were still awkward conversations, moments where the generational gap felt wide. Mali would likely always worry about security, and Anand and Dara would likely always value autonomy and purpose alongside financial stability. But the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. The fear of judgment that had kept Anand and Dara guarded began to recede, replaced by a cautious openness. Mali, in turn, felt less like an outsider, peering anxiously into their lives, and more like a part of it, albeit one who was still learning the steps. Months later, during Songkran, the Thai New Year, they gathered not at the bookstore, but at Mali and Somchai's house in Nonthaburi. The atmosphere was relaxed. Anand and Dara helped Mali prepare the food, laughing easily with her in the kitchen. Later, during the traditional water-pouring ceremony to show respect to elders, Anand gently poured scented water over Mali's hands. "We wish you health and happiness this year, May," he said softly, meeting her eyes. Mali looked at her son, at the genuine affection in his gaze, and felt tears well up, not of anxiety or frustration, but of gratitude. She covered his hands briefly with her own. "Thank you, Luck. I wish the same for you and Dara. Much happiness." The bookstore Ink and Echoes was still finding its footing in the competitive Bangkok landscape. Its future remained unwritten. But the story of Mali and her children had turned a significant page. The communication lines, once frayed and crackling with static, were clearer now, carrying tentative messages of respect, understanding, and a love that was finally learning to speak a language they could all understand. It was an ongoing translation, requiring patience and effort, but the connection felt real, resilient, and deeply precious. The journey hadn't ended. Perhaps such journeys never truly do within families. It was more like finding a new, more sustainable rhythm. Mali found herself asking different questions now, not just during visits, but in her own internal monologue. Instead of "are they safe?" she started asking, "are they fulfilled?" Instead of "are they making enough money?" she wondered, "are they learning and growing?" It didn't erase her concerns entirely. A mother's worry is a deeply etched pattern, but it shifted the focus, broadened her definition of a life well lived. She discovered a quiet joy in witnessing their small victories through their eyes. A glowing review from a discerning customer, a successful workshop that left participants buzzing with inspiration, Dara getting a small illustration commission based on work seen in the shop. Mali learned to celebrate these moments with them, offering genuine praise instead of anxious caveats. She realized her approval, freely given, was perhaps the most valuable support she could offer. Anand and Dara, sensing the sustained shift, grew more comfortable sharing not just their successes, but also their struggles. They might mention a slow month or a supplier issue, not as a prelude to parental lecture, but simply as part of the ebb and flow of their lives. Mali learned to respond with empathy rather than alarm. "That sounds challenging," she might say. "What are your thoughts on how to approach it?" Sometimes they wanted suggestions, other times they just needed to vent. Learning to differentiate became part of her ongoing education in mindful communication. She even found herself defending their choices to relatives who echoed her own past criticisms. "Running your own business is hard work," she told her sister firmly during one phone call. "Anand and Dara are very dedicated. They are building something meaningful." Hearing the words come out of her own mouth solidified her changed perspective. Meaningful, that was a word she hadn't associated with their venture before, but now it felt right. One evening, looking at a photo Dara had sent, Anand laughing, covered in paint after helping an artist set up an installation in the shop, Mali felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with financial security. He looked happy, genuinely, unreservedly happy. And tired, yes. But it was the satisfying exhaustion of purposeful effort, not the weary strain she used to perceive. Perhaps, she mused, sipping her evening tea, security wasn't just about stable jobs and predictable futures. Perhaps it was also about finding your place, building connections, waking up eager to face the day, even if that day involved wrestling with invoices or recalcitrant coffee machines. Perhaps her children, in their small book-filled corner of Bangkok, were more secure in their chosen path than she had ever allowed herself to believe. The thought didn't erase all worry, but it brought a profound sense of peace. She still loved them fiercely, protectively, but now her love felt less like a cage of anxiety and more like a quiet space held open, trusting them to navigate their own journey, knowing she would be there to listen, truly listen, along the way.